Welcome to this new how-to. In this how-to we're going to look at how you can start the engines of the Antonov AN-225. I'm not going to do it on the top of my head, of course, but I'm going to use this fantastic checklist which is available inside the aircraft. However, there are some caveats, and those are the ones which I'm going to point out. So let's first go to the batteries. So the batteries need to be in the up position like this. You can clearly see it because if you don't switch on the batteries, you will see that these lights are not illuminating. Right, so as soon as you switch on the batteries, you will hear the co-pilot also starting to talk, which is good. Then there's one recommendation here. It says switch on the say external ground power unit, say optional, but I would definitely do it the first time because you might be searching for some buttons and you might want to pause between things. And if you do it too long, that will result in the aircraft not having enough power and it will switch off completely and you need to start from scratch. Once you've done that, we can go to the APU part, right? The APU part can be found here. And the first thing we need to do is switch off the fuel heater and switch on the fire loop. As soon as you switch on the fire loop, you can see that this button changes to open. Then you need to modify the bleed air. That will change to something which I can't read, but maybe you know it. Maybe it's also open. And then make sure that you are opening the master switch, which is over here. And then you can move this button to the top and then press this button. And you only need to press very short. If you think, hey, it does not work, then give it a few seconds before, because it will react. If you're not sure if it doesn't work, then you should see, I would say, in a few seconds, you should mode. And if you still are unsure, you can still press it, because as long as you don't press this button, which says stop, then you're good. The same thing needs to be done on the other side, right? So we're gonna do it a little bit in, I would say, fast pace, because else we need to wait too long. Gonna make sure that this is set and press this magnificent button, which then will change to mode in a few buttons, and then this angle will also start to move, right? So as soon as these two angles start to move, you will also see that this gouge and this gouge will change. So keep an eye on these gouges and then wait until they're complete before you continue with the next step, which is switching on the APU generator left and right switch. And that's the that's, I would say, the next gotcha. So let's wait, and then as soon as you can see that it slows down a bit, and then if it passes the 6, it goes pretty fast again. So that's really cool. So continuing with that, and then it will change to ready to start in most cases. I've seen one scenario where this one was had a different value, and it again has air intake not closed, but to be honest, I don't know what it is, and how I also didn't find a way to fix it, but that's something on my list to figure out. Then we're moving over to this button, and here you can already see that it says APU generator left and right switch, and switch them on. But you can already see that those are on, right? So if you play around with this, you can see that it drops, and if you do it like this, it will go to a maximum value. So based on that, I think these are the correct positions based on what I could find. After that, you can switch off the external power, and we continue with the nice buttons over here, which are called the rectifier buttons. And as soon as you switch them over, you will see that those red warnings will switch away, and these nice buttons over here will start to turn into green. The same thing is applicable for the rectifier ones. For the transformer ones, sorry. You can switch them on, and as soon as you do that, these lights will turn into green, and the warnings below that will go away. The next part is on the other side of the aircraft. Is all these buttons. You will need to switch them on individually. They're used the same, or they have the same name, instrument nav, but they're used for different purposes, as I figured out. But simply switch them on, and then you should be good to go, because then you can see also the ADF starting to illuminate. Once this part's done, you can continue with the pilot part, and the pilot part is simply switching on all the buttons which you can see over here. Of course, it's recommended to do it in the order it's discussed in the manual, but what I figured out is if you start here and move over here and then continue with this, you should be pretty good. There's one thing which I figured out is the ASI and AHI. They might be or you might want to do them in different order. That was the word I was looking for, right? So these buttons can be done in a different order. So for the first officer, that's where FO stands for. Same thing. You can switch on the buttons. It starts with where is it? HSI bus, right? Then it starts with the radio meter, then nav 1 and 2, then the communication radio. And if you scroll down the list, you will find that you also need to switch on the air data, both of them, and all three of them, sorry. And the other buttons are not discussed because the VSI tag, did we already that? Oh, sorry, I missed that one. And the FO ASI is not discussed, so you can switch that or leave that one switched off. There's no need to switch it on. Then you continue with the lights. So those are the navigation lights, and in the meantime you can see that several buttons start to illuminate here, which is good. The next part is the fuel valves, and you might think, hey, I need to change it, but believe me, you don't need to change them. Leave them as is, because if you play around with them, then the engines won't start. So that's good for now. And then the other part is the hydraulic pump switches. Also leave them in the position as they are, because they're in the correct position. It's really unclear sometimes to see if they're on or off, but leave them like they are currently. Then continue with the fuel pumps, and this is simply making sure that everything is set correctly. You don't need to change anything based on my experience. It's fuel valve 1, number 2 is here, then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And as you can see, they're in the correct order, because if they're illuminated, that's the good way. And you can do that for engine 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 if you want. Next step is the payload, but I'm not going to discuss that one. You can change the payload from here if you want to do it, but it's not strictly necessary. One good thing to validate is if the autopilot has been switched, or not the autopilot, the navigation switch or system has been switched on. You can press the OK, and then it will start to search for, I would say, some more information, right? It will try to acquire the satellites. And this button, the navigate setup, right? That's something which you can do, but we're going to skip for now, as well as the autopilot part, which it can be configured here, right? So you can see this is the light if the autopilot has been switched on, but over here you can see the AP course button, you can see the wing level button, the auto pitch hold button. You can navigate or change this button to make sure that the autopilot source is being used is different, right? In this case, 4.2. And then on the right side of this main panel, you can change also some other things like, hey, what's the for heading, right? You can select it, you can change it. As you can see, it will change if you move this one from 4.1 to 4.2 to APK1 to. The other thing you can change is the AP speed, right? You can change it to APS, IS, APS, GS, and TAS. And the buttons over here are to use the AP turn 90, the AP HSI sync, right? The AP circle left and right, and then the maximum banking and the maximum pitch, and function number 1 and function number 2. And then the altitude select mode, and the altitude select mode allows you to change the values over here, right? So that's, I would say, cool, right? You can do a lot of from here. Some of them can be changed from here, but as you can see, right, you need to still find a way to, let's say, update those values. If you enable options, they will turn to green, so that's something which is good to know. But for now, we will skip the autopilot because we don't need it for now. This part of the autopilot, we missed it, so I will I will discuss this one. This is for the vertical speed, right, as well as the airspeed. You will find them here. You can set the maximum airspeed and as well as the climb, the vertical mode, and the vertical hold mode, as well as the altitude, right? You can change it over here using this nice button, right? Works good. Now we're coming to the most coolest part, of course, is starting the engines. But before that, let's switch on the beacons. The cover can be found here, and there you will find a lot of buttons. So first we need to make sure that the start mode is set to rich, and you can do that by pressing these buttons like this. And then you need to make sure that you set the hydraulic transfer switches to on, which is, I would say, oh sorry, these are the ratio switches, so you need to move them in this position. Once that's done, you need to make sure that the hydraulic transfer switches are on, which is this case, and then check the engine status. So the engine status can be checked here, where we are, and this is what you need to do. Once you've done that, you need to switch them off again. Make sense? I don't know. But let's do that and then go back to the FADEC switches. The FADEC switches are behind you, if I'm correct. And once you've done that, you can go to the starting the engines, and that's on the bottom part again. Don't be, I would say, distracted by this. This is normal. So what you can do is you can press select the engines. Ready, engine 6, 4 or 1 up to 6, and then say this button, ready to boost, which is the auto start button, and then press this magnificent button, which will then say, if we are lucky, it will say, hey, starting the sequence, and then it will start doing its magic. I've played around with this a bit. It's sometimes, it's a little bit weird that it doesn't work. But I've also figured out that sometimes you need to play around with these buttons, because in my case it's still unclear in which mode they need to be honest. Because if you do it like this, it also doesn't change, right? Or now it changes, so that was the trick. You need to leave them in this position. Sorry for the wrong information. Make sure they're in this position, then it's good. And then the next part is you can monitor the engines. And the engines can be monitored here. And you can see that the arrows will start moving. It will do engine 1 first, then I think it was engine number 6, if I'm correct. Yeah, engine 6, then 2, then 5, then 3, then 4. That's the order in which it will start the engines. So be aware of that. It will take you some time, but let's leave it as is. And once it's done, you can switch on the hydraulic switches again, and you can of course close the cover, and then move to the generator switches and switch them on, right? Currently you can see that they are switched to off, but that's normal because we're still waiting to start the engine. And this will take, I would say, a lot of time. In some cases, if you did something wrong, then it will stay stuck in this position forever and ever. If that's the case, then make sure that you go to all the buttons and make sure that they're in the correct position. It's something I experienced myself also. So you're not the only one if you make an error the first few times. So let's see what it's doing. Right, so let's see over here. You don't see also much here. That's the frustrating part. Maybe these were in the correct position. Maybe I was simply not waiting long enough. The good thing is that you can also abort the process, right? So if you want to abort it, you press this option, and then if you want to start from scratch again, you press this option. But I do think that they missed a step, that you need to place these into this mode. Here you see, even in this mode, it still works. So I'm still doubting in which position they need to be. You can see that this one increases again. But at one point it should continue. And if it doesn't do it, then you need to revalidate everything. because this should be kind of a short period where it's in, and then it should continue to start the engine. And of course, always when you record something, it will go wrong, like this time. I will do it like this. That was it. Switching these to this position works. So it will remain a question mark if it needs to be in this position or in the other position. But as you can hear now, the engine is starting. This one also moves away, so that's good. So as I mentioned, right, it will take, I would say, a lot of time before the engines are starting. You can see that they are doing it in sequences. So it will, I think it will take at least 10 minutes or something before they start. Or before all the engines have started, let's keep it that way. But that gives me the time to also validate the manual, right? What does the manual say? Because the manual sometimes says, or gives you some more guidance on how to set up the engines. So let me have a look at it while you're listening to the nice engine power. Yeah, the mixture ratio settings simply say unguard and select all on, guard all but starting engines. It's not, I would say, to me, it's still abacadabra. But hey, you hear it, right? You hear those nice engine sounds. And the good tip is that, again, right, as I just mentioned, is use the manual for which is a part of this aircraft, which you can find in the resources folder, because it contains some additional information about some of the switches and some other information which is really useful, if you ask me. So how should you read the gauges? This is 1, this engine number 2, then this engine number 6. So if I'm correct, because there's no text above it, so still, I would say you would expect 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but could also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. As engine number 5 is still not in the correct position, could also be a different order. And if we would go to the outside, you will see that the engines are now starting and turning around, which is good. So we've got 1, 2, 3 engines started, 3 to go, so we're almost, I would say, on the half of it. There's also an option to manual start them, right? That's described here, where it says, hey, this is the way you need to set them up. So that means engine 1 up to 6. Then we'll do it in the order, or you need to do more work. But if you like to do that, then I would say do that. It's really up to you. I've went for the easy way. So there's also a more difficult way if you want to challenge yourself. But I would say first start with the basic things and then continue with the rest, right? So it's still switching on. So let's go to the outside, right? Let's listen. See that 2 of them are spinning, right? And on the other end, 3 of them already. Now the last one starts spinning. So I would say we're in a good shape. And you can see that only engine 4 requires, I would say, busy to start. So So let's see if it also starts, because you can see that some of the angles are further than the other ones. But here it comes. So probably there's a reason that two of them are spinning faster than the other one. Right, you can see that the three on the top are, say, having a higher RPM compared to the other ones. Probably there's a reason for it. So we're in good shape. All the engines have started. Let's continue with switching on the hydraulic switches, right, which are these buttons. And then making sure that we close the cover and don't press these buttons, because else you can start from scratch. So hydraulic switches were on. Oh, sorry, I pressed these ones, but I meant the other ones. So you need to leave these ones off. So you can switch these on. But again, right, it's really hard to say if they're in the on or off position. But as you can see, they're by default on. As you can see, the lights burning here, and that's what I also demonstrated right by switching it on. So we're switching it off and then back on. So leave them as is. Once you've done that, you can switch on the generators, and then you will directly see these things burning green. These ones, I would say, increasing the values, and then you know, okay, hey, I'm in good shape. And then you can do, I would say, the rest, right? Which means after the engine start. So after the engine start, you will need to do a lot of things. You need to stop the APUs, and you can do it by pressing these buttons over here. If not already done, it will do it. Then you can switch off the fire loop left and right, as well as these buttons. And then you will see that this, say, slows down, right? So that's good. And then of course the master switches, and then lock it down, as well as these ones. We don't need them anymore, which is good. Next step is the flaps, and the flaps can be found next to the fuel throttle, so you can move them 2 degrees, as that's the first position which is there. Then it's good. You can arm the ground spoilers if not already done, and then reverse thrust handle should be up, let's say, and then you can, I can't move it, oh, like this, and that's up, so that's good. And then the last one is, of course, make sure that the flight controls are clear. You check the aileron and rudder trims, the wheels, and then once you've done that, right, you switch on the taxi lights. Sorry, taxi lights. It says taxi lights, right? But it looks like that these are the landing lights, but hey, it says taxi lights, which is good. And then you can switch on the logo, and then you're kind of done, right? Because then you can, I would say, make your way to the runway and then enjoy this nice aircraft. You can still see that there are some errors, right? So it's always good to, let's say, have a look at them and fix them, of course, because we now are, let's say, simply taking off or making our way. But it's always a good way to say, hey, let's resolve those issues. And you can see that it's the IS check and the IA2 failure, while the other ones are in okay. So probably I did something wrong, and that happens, right? So you can go to the cockpit again and validate if there are any warning lights are burning, and if so, you can fix it. But I'm not going to do it right now. I will probably figure out where it's which caused it, and if I found it, then I will let you know. So here ends the video where we went to the startup process of the Antonov AN-225. You can see that it's, I would say, not easy, because some of it is a little bit unclear in which positions the switches need to be. But hopefully this video made it a little bit more clear, although I might have set you on the wrong feed when starting the engines. But hey, eventually we got the engines spinning up. Here ends the video. I hope you liked it. If you liked it, then consider to use the like button. If you've got a question or comments, then feel free to post them in the comment box below. And if you want to stay up to date about new videos I'm posting, then make sure that you're subscribing to my channel. Thanks for watching and see you next time.